Should your child learn how to read music? The age-old debate rages on. I'm Eric Barassa with the Fort Worth Music Academy, and I want to talk about a question that comes up a lot, the concern from parents that their child is not reading enough music in their lessons. So I always ask, why do you want your child to be able to read music? I know how to read music myself. I had to learn while I was in music school, and I'm so glad I did. There's a lot of benefits to it, but for everybody who's playing music, it's not necessarily needed. I mean, if you signed up for music lessons, you would fully expect your child to learn how to be able to read music. It's a fundamental part of becoming a musician, right? Well, not necessarily. Maybe. Sometimes, okay? How's that for clarity? All right, well, the good news is today I'm going to give you a few examples of different learning styles for students and why reading music should probably be a part of what they're doing, but it doesn't necessarily need to be their main focus. All right, so first let's get down to what is your hope for your child in music lessons? Are you wanting them to become a professional musician? Are they wanting to study at the college and university level? Are they wanting to play in an orchestra? Are they wanting to play in a rock band? Are they wanting to do this professionally, or are they wanting to do it just to be able to relax and for some stress relief or a creative outlet when they grow up? Or are you just kind of hoping to build their self-confidence and have them discover a little bit more about who they are as a person? I will tell you 9 times out of 10, most parents, the number one thing that they want out of music lessons when they come to us is self-confidence. It's the number one thing that they are after. So I'm going to focus mostly on the parents that are wanting their kids to be able to build self-confidence because it is the number one thing that parents tell me. Okay, so let me give you the argument for why your child absolutely should learn to read music. So when I was in college studying classical guitar, I had to learn how to read music, and I'm really glad I did. It was a frustrating experience at first, and I know when I was a teenager, when I was 13 years old, I tried teaching myself how to learn how to read music, and it about killed my spirit. When I would play my favorite songs, when I would learn some of my favorite guitar riffs, I was having a really good time. But when I tried to sit down and learn how to read music from a book, I really hated it. But in college, fortunately, they were making me do it, so I had to get good at it. But there were a lot of benefits to this. Number one is being able to read music gives you a better understanding of what is happening in the piece. It gives you a better idea of the dynamics, as well as the pitches being played and the rhythms. It gives you that complete picture. Furthermore, if you know how to read music, you can play something you've never even heard before. Okay, somebody can put a piece of music that you've never seen, you've never heard, and just with the ability to read, you can figure out how to play this piece of music. And that, I think, is a really valuable skill. If you're going the professional route, it is going to make you more hireable. The majority of professional musicians, from my experience, don't know how to read music, and it's not really required. It's more important that they're just really good at playing and good at listening to each other and taking direction and knowing how to serve the song. But if you can have that extra leg up on how to read music, particularly for a pianist, a piano player really needs to be able to read music. And if you can be an accompanist and be able to play for people. And even as a teenager, you could get hired by vocalists to play for them, and you can make quite a bit more money than if you were to work at the local Starbucks or Target or anywhere else. The other great thing about learning how to read music is if you forget where you are in a piece of music, it's easy to reference and remember what to play next. And then finally, the cool thing about reading music is I find it relaxing. I find it to be a very similar experience to sitting and reading a book. When I'm reading a book, I have to focus 100% on that thing, and I get kind of lost in it. And the same is true of reading music. So there's really no downside to reading music, and for some instruments, it's the only way to be able to play the music. Really, is to be able to read. Like if you play piano, you should be able to read. Any of the brass or woodwind instruments, you should be able to do that. For stringed instruments, you can get away with reading tablature. Thinking about guitar in particular, you get the numbers and you get the shapes of what's happening, and that's what we start with guitar players. But for piano, reading music is really the best way to be able to visually see what is happening. So there is a little bit of a difference in the start. Guitar, our philosophy is reading music comes later. We start with reading the tablature first. Piano, we start with reading the music right away. All right, now let me give kind of a counter argument. Here's why reading music really doesn't matter, okay? If our end goal is to be able to play music, then what difference does it make how we get there? Okay, so maybe you do best by just watching somebody else and copying it. Maybe you do best by hearing and listening to a piece of music and figuring it out. Or maybe really the best way you do it is by, in fact, reading. So it kind of depends on what is going to help you learn the music fastest, okay? Reading music is a means to an end and not the end itself. So if I can learn how to play the same song and have fun doing it and entertain other people doing it, and I can do it by listening to the song versus reading it off a page, well, what difference does it really make? For the vast majority of students that come see us at Fort Worth Music Academy, they are not going to become professional musicians. They're not going to study at the college level, and that's why reading music ultimately is not that important. All right, so let's take 3 examples of different learning styles and how these students might learn with us. So the first student learns by ear. Okay, that means they're really good at hearing something and then being able to figure it out. Well, sometimes parents are concerned that they're like, I'm afraid my kid is just hearing it and being able to play it. And to that I say, oh my gosh, that's incredible. It's a really powerful skill to have, and run with it. If your kiddo can hear, let's develop that ear, because the very best musicians I know are really good at interacting with other musicians, hearing what they're doing, and then being able to play off of them. And it's much more conversational. By using your ear, you can have a conversation with the audience and with other musicians, and then also with songs that you hear on the radio. Versus if you are reading music, then you're really just tied to whatever is on the paper. It's like the difference between having a conversation and giving a speech. All right, so let's take another example. Student number 2 learns just by memorizing things super quickly. They have a really sharp memory. They can see something once or twice and then commit it to memory. All right, so this happens a lot with our piano students, that they will learn how to read through the music once, but then they'll quickly commit it to memory so that they don't have to look at the music again. And to that, again, I say that is awesome as well. So long as, if they do forget, they are able to reference the music and look at it again. So I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in college, reading classical guitar music is quite difficult. And especially for someone who didn't grow up reading music, having a crash course in college, learning how to read very quickly, what I usually did, because it took me so long, was I would just try to memorize sections of music as quickly as possible so that I could spend more time focusing on making the music sound good rather than trying to figure out what was on the page. That being said, if I forgot, I was always able to go back and reference the music. So at the end of the day, I encourage students to memorize music as quickly as possible, because it allows them to spend more time working on their technique and the musicality rather than trying to just figure out the what note is on the page. So the less time we can spend figuring out what to play, and the more time we can spend on how to play it, the better. All right, so let's talk about a student, our third and final example, who can only read music. They're not great with their ear, they're not great at memorizing, but they're really good at reading music. This is fantastic because essentially they can play anything. However, the problem with only this approach, and I don't know very many people who only do this, but if you can only read music, then you're going to have a hard time doing anything without the music in front of you. You are essentially stuck if you don't have sheet music right in front of you. You have a hard time analyzing what's happening. You're having a hard time paying attention to your technique. And you're also having a hard time being able to interact with other musicians, because if somebody says, hey, let's try changing this and doing it instead, well, you're saying, well, that's not what the page says. You don't get to have that musical conversation with them. You're stuck reciting your speech, as it were, from the music. All right, so our approach at Fort Worth Music Academy is, yeah, you guessed it, we want a balanced diet. We want a little bit of everything. We want to help our students develop their ear. We want them to get good at memorizing, and we also want them to get good at reading music, okay? But ultimately, we want to focus on what your goal is for your child, or if you're an adult student, what your goal is. And like I said, for most people, their goal is not to be able to read music. It's to be able to play music. And so we're going to help you do that by playing to your strengths. What are your natural strengths? Let's spend most of our time focused on those. But then we don't want to neglect our weaknesses. We also want to spend time working on your weaknesses. So if a student is wanting to read music, or we determine that they need to be able to read music as they're going, we might spend 60% of our time not reading music, focusing on these activities, but then 40% of our time developing those reading skills. And again, with piano, you're going to start reading music day one. With drums, you're going to be doing mostly ear, but you will start reading music pretty quickly with that as well. With voice, typically not for a while. And then same with guitar. Guitar, we're going to focus on tablature and watching other people. And then as your skills develop later down the road, it'll probably be several years, but with guitar, we will teach your child how to read music. But that's going to come several years into their playing rather than day one. I've seen too many guitar students give up and fail out of frustration because they were trying to take on too much at once, and that was a result mostly of trying to learn how to read music while developing their technique. And so for guitar and bass, it really is better to do it the other way around, whereas drums and piano, you can start reading music right away. So I'm really just talking about the instruments that we teach here at Fort Worth Music Academy, but I hope that kind of gives you an idea of our approach. And if you have any concerns about your child and how they're learning, definitely share that with us. You can email me, eric@fortworthmusicacademy.com. You can email the main school account, info@fortworthmusicacademy.com. You can always call us. We want to help in any way we can along the journey, and it evolves as we go. And the further you get into it, our approach to teaching and the approach to learning is going to evolve to fit the needs of the individual student. So it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer, but in general, we're working on that balanced diet of developing the ear, developing your memory, and learning how to read music. All right, you can, if you got questions, let me know. Let me know in the comments below. You can also schedule an introductory lesson with us at fortworthmusicacademy.com. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with you soon. All right, bye.